It is Pittsburgh Penguins time on Scouching's NHL Prospect Pipeline Recap Series, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are one of, I would say, a very small handful of NHL teams where they might be entering a real, true rebuild, and we will see how things go for them over the next season or two, and I would keep my expectations relatively low, but that being said, under Kyle Dubas, I think they've done a pretty good job giving themselves a lot of really intriguing names that might be on this team before you might expect. So leading things off, there's nobody really that I saw that really belonged in the franchise or even the core tier, but Pittsburgh is a team that I think has a lot of players that really push that limit of the depth tier. For me, leading the way, there's a number of players here, but Tanner Howe, Ben Kindle, and Bill Zonin all have been really impressive junior hockey players in Canada. I think Bill Zonin has an extremely strong floor, and I would say a higher ceiling than people might lead on, but that being said, there is a bit of a limited game there, but I think a really solid NHL one. With Ben Kindle, almost the opposite is true. I think there's a universe where he struggles to make the NHL, but if he really hits, he might be one of the best players to come out of this past season's NHL draft, especially when it comes to playmaking and just two-way impact. I feel a little bit similarly about Ville Koivunen, and I felt that he looked really good in AHL time last year. I already mentioned Tanner Howe, but whenever I caught the Hitmen last year, he was a standout playing alongside a guy like Ben Kindle, and the rest of the guys in this tier are no slouch either. I think Owen Pickering is maybe undershooting what his draft potential was, but he was always a long-term project with a lot of upside and a very low floor. Rutger McGroarty is a player who is a bit similar, a complementary offensive player that I think needs a good supporting cast around him, but the finishing ability is there, and we will see where that goes. Mikhail Ilyin, I think, is a bit of a wild card over in Russia. I haven't been blown away with his play over there, but whenever I have seen him, I could see a player here that plays in your top 9 as a complementary offensive player that may not have a huge amount of offensive upside, but a solid player nonetheless. I also upgraded Harrison Brunick to this level. I do feel a little bit pessimistic about his overall game, but I do think that the skating ability and offensive tendencies will go a long way to help him make the NHL in some way with Pittsburgh. You can always bet on decently big, rangy defensemen that have that offensive confidence, especially in this day and age, and while I do think that there are a bit of issues in the game that might withhold him from a super high NHL potential, I saw enough of him this year that definitely surprised me relative to what I saw in his draft year. In the maybes category, there are a lot of players here, but a lot of them I think are good bets, to say the least. Melvin Fernstrom, this might surprise some people after the successful season he had in Sweden, but I would say he's really pushing the upper limits of this category. He's big, he's got some skill, there's just a good two-way impact there that maybe he finds his way as a checking forward in the NHL with a bit of skill on the side. The other one that I would say similar things about is their first-round pick from this past year in Will Horkoff. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of Horkoff, and he wasn't in my first round this year, but it is pretty easy to see how he could be a third or fourth line center in the NHL, maybe a physical winger if the center job doesn't really work out, but I think he's got the strength and the size to win some faceoffs and eat some minutes, but I'm not totally sure about high-end NHL upside. I thought Pittsburgh had one of the best drafts out there, honestly, with how many guys I really feel belong in this group. Save for goaltender Sergei Murashov is all guys they drafted this year. Peyton Kettles, Charlie Treadaway, and Brady Peddle are all big, rangy defensemen with a little bit of skill to them and maybe some flashes of potential offense, but really just a good foundation to build on. There's guys like Quinn Beauchene, who personally I love. I think he brings that more rarer style of puck possession style defenseman that I think is difficult to manage, but if you can figure it out and if he really comes a ways, he might be a draft steal from this past year. And then Travis Hayes, Ryan Miller, these are more undersized-ish guys, but they play with a really grindy style of play. There's some skill in their game, some finishing ability, and honestly, Gabriel Daigle, maybe he hasn't lived up to his QMJHL draft status as a top 3 pick, but at the end of the day, he is playing on a team that did not do him any favors last year, and he did tread water decently well, and when I saw tape of him with Victoriaville this year, I thought he was perfectly fine. And then in the everyone else category, not everyone is going to be a hit, but there are a lot of players in here who maybe over long time periods might jump up a little bit here and there on this pyramid, but at the end of the day, I just am not totally sold on NHL level upside. That said, I did like Joona Väisänen coming off of an NCAA championship season. Again, I'm not sure about NHL potential, but he was a really good NCAA NCAA defensemen last year. I have liked Zam Plante, although he is getting on the older side. Max Swanson had a decent season, but the potential likelihood of him being a high-end NHL player, I just don't really see it, and I don't see a bottom six NHL player there. And the rest of these guys, I mean, they're fine. I wouldn't expect huge output from these guys. I've liked Jordan Chiron's pure skill. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Carter Sanderson's style of play, but I think he's a ways away, and it's really hard to see what his NHL output's going to be. But minute for minute this season in the USHL, I really liked him, and I think if anybody was really pushing it in this tier relative to their age, he might be right there as well. So for Pittsburgh, I'm going to give them a 2A. I just think they have a lot of good, fun tools here. There are probably 5, 6, maybe 7 solid potential NHL players here. A lot of them are probably not that far away from an everyday gig, and I think they have a lot of interesting players that, whether it's this year or next year or maybe even the year after, a number of these players will at least get the reps in the NHL to see what they're like there. They'll get some experience, and maybe you'll see what they're capable of, and they'll probably add a lot more players between now and then, and who knows who's going to be on this team in the next few years. They've got some really nice bets on the future, especially on the back end for me. I've liked Brunick this year. I think Pickering is a pretty solid player still, but Kettles and Treadaway, even Brady Peddle were really interesting pickups. I'm a personal huge fan of Quinn Beauchene, as I said. I think their goaltending tandem of Gabe Daigle and Sergei Murashov have been pretty solid, especially Murashov, who has been absolutely lights out. It's really hard for me to definitely see NHL upside with goaltenders, so Murashov probably is the closest thing to a depth level here, but he is on the older side of things. But if anyone is in that maybes category that maybe should be in the depth category, I might say Murashov. But that being said, the Pittsburgh Penguins, at the beginning of what might be a rebuild, I think are looking pretty good to have some good young talent that rounds out their roster, and if they can add a couple of really high-octane players in the draft, or however else they might be able to do it in the next season or two, there might be a nice little rebound here for Pittsburgh in the near future. And with that, we're going to call it. If you liked the video, definitely like and subscribe. If you really liked it, definitely consider a subscription over at Scouching.ca, where you can get access to all kinds of fun data tools and our Discord server, and plenty of other fun stuff that you're just not going to find anywhere else on the internet. So check that out at Scouching.ca. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.